kindly mute yourself. My name is Leah Peer. I'm the music director of Kol Nashim, the women's choir of the Colorado Hebrew Chorale. And welcome to the first session of Marvelous Musical Men, focusing on the inimitable Arik Einstein. And for those of you who are watching in Facebook land, nobody is monitoring this live, but anything you write in the comments section, I promise I will see either later or tomorrow. And if there are questions, I will answer them. So this was probably the most difficult program for me to put together because there was just so much material for me to go through. So I am going to start my share screen. And those of you who have been at my presentations before know that I like to prepare a PowerPoint. If you set your Zoom on split screen, you'll be able to see both people and me. And when we start doing the songs, if you escape from full screen, you can have two screens, one with the YouTube that I'm going to show and one with your words. So Arik Einstein, who left us much too soon in 2013, was born Aryeh Leib Einstein, which for me personally, Aryeh is my son's middle name, and Leib is my father's middle name, and both of them mean lion. And so why is it so difficult? Why was it so difficult to start curating this program? Arik Einstein was active for close to 55 years. He released, he released 50 albums with, multiply 14 to 20 songs per album, and the great majority of them became hits. And so if you were an Israeli, Arik Einstein basically created the soundtrack of your life. The way that popular Israeli music worked is that, yes, it was created in a certain generation, but the groups brought back older songs. When I was in high school, there were songs from the 50s that my classmates said, well, how do you not know this song? And it's like, well, I made Aliyah in 1970, so I didn't have a chance to learn those. But just like for Americans of a certain generation, Frank Sinatra was the soundtrack of your life. Or for probably everybody on this call, the Beatles are the soundtrack of your life. And you can bring up any number of songs. For Israelis, Arik Einstein created the soundtrack for people's lives. In addition, he was a collaborator sine qua non. And really my comparisons are not an exaggeration. Lennon and McCartney, Elton John and Bernie Taupin, people who worked together and somehow captured magic in a bottle more times than not. And not only was he an amazing collaborator, and that ultimately is how I organized the material. He was very generous. So he was usually the senior partner. And he found like-minded people, like-souled people, and they were partners in his life throughout his life. Sometimes he worked with one, sometimes he worked with another, but the relationships and the symbiosis continued throughout his life. And I like to think that and Paul McCartney has said recently, there was an anniversary of Lennon's dying, that he and John Lennon reconciled not long before John was shot. And I think that had John lived, they somehow would have come back to do work together again, because finding somebody that you have that unique ability to work with and create something that's more magical than either of you on your own is something precious and rare. And Einstein found it over and over again. So interesting for those of you who watched my Fabulous Fiery Females, and we talked about, well, this one is from this, her family's from this country, and that one's from that country. And Estelle Farim, her family was from Baghdad, even though they had been in Israel for 5 generations. We find no mention of where Arik Einstein's family is from, although obviously with a name like Einstein, we know he's Ashkenazi. So this leads me to understand that the family was in Israel for a long time. He was born in Tel Aviv, which made him, for the people of his generation, born in 1939, born in the 30s or the 40s, more of the aristocracy of the arts community. His father, Yaakov, was an actor, a well-known actor. We know nothing, there's no material about his mother. I found hours and hours and pages, very little written about his parents at all. And the poet Avraham Chalfi was a family friend who actually wrote a poem in honor of his birth. And remember that name because we will come back to it later. He went to high school in Gimnasia Tel Aviv. As somebody, myself, who went to high school in Jerusalem, we knew that the kids who went to Gimnasia, and it's not a gym or a gymnasium, it's from Eastern European Gimnasia, which is the academic high school. And so the kids who went to school in Gimnasia Tel Aviv and Gimnasia Herzliya were very much the snobs. They were the elite of the country. I participated for a short period of time as an athlete in the long jump. And the kids who were from the Gimnasia didn't talk to us. I went to an area school in Harei Yehuda, in the mountains outside of Jerusalem, didn't talk to us. Einstein became quite tall quite early. By the time he was 17, he was close to 6'3". I believe he topped out at 6'4". And as a high schooler, he participates in sports competition. He holds the national junior high jump record. Actually, for 10 years, nobody was able to break his record. Loves basketball, but he has severe myopia. And so he is not eligible to serve as a fighter in Israel, in Hebrew, kravi, a fighting unit. And so his father says, why don't you go volunteer to be in one of the entertainment troops? You should go to Le'akat HaNachal, which just happens to be the elite premier entertainment troupe. And we did a session about that troupe. I was going to say many years ago. It was only a few months, but we did a session a few months ago. And so he goes and he does his audition for this troupe. And he mentions his vision. And those of you who speak Hebrew, just YouTube Arik Einstein interview, and there's wonderful stuff out there. And he said his vision was so bad that it wasn't an issue of whether he could see the trees, but that he shouldn't bump into the trees. And I'm unsure because, you know, there are videos and you'll see, and he has this look, he looks like he's stoned. And I think some of them he probably is stoned, but some of them, it's that look of people who take their glasses off and can't see anything. And so he joins Le'akat HaNachal, and I just learned this pen feature, so let me get my pen. Come here, oop. And so he joins Le'akat HaNachal, which we have heard of, and he makes many important friends, one of whom is this gentleman over here, Uri Zohar, with whom he has a lifelong friendship, very creative. Uri Zohar is a senior member. He was born 1935 to Einstein's 1939. So really he becomes, in Einstein's second year in the troupe, he becomes the commander of the troupe. The first commander who auditions him is Topol. This is Einstein right here and right here. So a delightful guy. And anybody know who this guy is here? I know it's blurry. That is Yehoram Gaon. And so I'm going to exit my screen share. Hang on. Whoop. Give me a second. I lost. Okay, there we go. Stop share. And so we're going to hear our first YouTube, which is from the period of being in Le'akat HaNachal. And you can hear him. And I apologize for the commercials. I have no control over them. So I have this muted. hang on, sorry. I'm going to make sure that I shared the sound, which I didn't. There we go. So this song is Ruach Stav, the wind of fall. The words by Yechiel Moher and the melody by Yochanan Zarai. And you will be able to hear Arik Einstein singing during the chorus, I believe. It might be the verse. Don't, oh my gosh, come on.
אל תתבייש, היה עצוב, אל תצטער, אם
Sorry, that is Einstein there on the verse.
תצטער, זאת היא עונה כזאת, חבוב, זה רק הסתיו, וזה עובר, לך ערירי, בליל העיר, הבט לרום, חפש כוכב, מותר גם לצעיר, להיות טיפה זקן בסתיו, זה הסתיו עם הענן ועם הרוח המייבב, ואם אתה סתם ציניקן, בכל זאת זה צובט בלב.
All right, so you can hear he has a lovely baritone voice. Doesn't sound at all like what we are used to thinking hearing as the Arik Einstein sound. And so let's resume our slideshow. So this is an important period of time in his life. He actually joins as an actor and gradually sings more and more, as we could hear. And then after he gets out of the army, he has assorted acting gigs, the most famous of them probably as Ziggy in Salach Shabati. And he releases a bunch of solo mini albums, which I guess I'm not familiar with, but in Israel at the time, they were releasing albums of 4 songs or 6 songs. And then he joins Batzal Yarok. And you may remember when we learned about Nechama Hendel, this was basically the army troop outside of the army, the same gang from the army troop. I think this guy in the middle is Arik Einstein, but I don't know. And they stayed together for a while until one of their members was killed in a car accident, and so they disbanded the group. And over the next period of years, he does a number of things. The biggest one is Shlishiat Gesher Hayalkon, the Gesher Hayalkon trio. This trio is one of the most influential groups in the history of Israeli music. And this is the beginning of Arik Einstein collaborating on classic after classic after classic after classic. And so it is initially with Benny Amdurski, Yoram Gaon, and Arik Einstein. I believe this is the same snapshot that they used for the record cover, but they reversed it. Yoram Gaon, as I mentioned, was also in the Nahal. And speaking of the Tel Aviv aristocracy in a series, an interview that I saw with Gaon, which we'll talk about more when we get to the session about Yoram Gaon, he mentions, and we're now 50 years after the fact, with great pain, how he was not allowed to sing in the Nahal. They never gave him solos. And if he got a solo, somehow or other, it was given to somebody else. Now remember that Uri Zohar was the commander at the time, and Uri Zohar stays involved with Arik Einstein's career very, very intimately for many years. And so it's not surprising that Yoram Gaon, after one season, leaves the trio to be replaced by Yisrael Gurion. Benny Amdulsky and Yisrael Gurion end up forming a duo that lasts for decades. And so we're going to do one of the songs from Shlishiat Gesher HaYarkon is going to be our first sing-along, and it's called Serenada. And some of you might remember that there's a popular fad in Israel to do salon songs. This is very much like a Spanish serenade. You'll hear it. It has a familiar sound to it, and written music and words by Naomi Shemer. And this is the last that we're going to see of any of the old guard composers when it comes to the career of Arik Einstein. And so this was written for the trio. It's a trio of men standing below a tower. And they say in the highest window, the light has already turned out. The last curtain has been closed, and we're down here shivering, singing you a serenade. All night, lady, your night's three, a holy serenade sing to you, but you never sent down a ladder or slyly threw a silk handkerchief or a glove that we can pick up for you. Above us, the apples have already fallen in autumn and are left in the winter rains. Summer is coming soon, and with it the heat, and how long will you turn your back on us? Sorry, that's an error in my translation. And then the guitar we bought has already lost a string. They're down there for a long time, these fellows. They're very loyal. The winds have blown off our hats, but we'll sing you in a hoarse voice until our curls turn silver. All night, lady, your night's three, a holy serenade sing to you, but none of them was ever to climb up and up the ladder to bring you a fan, a silk handkerchief, or a glove, which you slyly threw down to us. So we are going to learn the chorus. And part of my challenge in finding songs for you is that many of the songs are through composed, which means that they don't have a chorus. But this one does. And I'm just going to sing it for you once.
Leah, did you say this was a metaphor for something or a real love poem?
This is a love song. This is three heartbroken young men singing up to the lady in the tower. You know, it's like a troubadour song of unrequited love, and they're please send us something down. And it's fall and it's winter and it's summer, and they're down there and they're aging, and it's a Naomi Shemer. I think sometimes a cigar is just a cigar. So I think this is just a plain old fashioned love song. So, Kol halayla isha, abirayich shlosha, serenada kdosha sharim lach, אבל את מעולם לא הורדת סולם, לא זרקת בחטיפה, מפחד משי או כפפה שנרים לך. And that chorus repeats 3 times. And then the 4th time, there's a little bit of a variation. So let's do the words first. Kol halayla isha. Ready? Kol halayla isha. Abirayich shlosha. Abirayich shlosha. Serenada kdosha. Serenada kdosha. Sharim lach. Sharim lach. So let's put that together. And you see the very clear rhyme pattern. You know, this is Naomi Shemer at her best, most consistent one. I'm going to read the whole thing. And then if you want to join me, fine, we'll repeat it twice. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. Kol halayla isha, abirayich shlosha, serenada kdosha, sharim lach. One more time. Kol halayla isha, abirayich shlosha, serenada kdosha, sharim lach. Kol halayla isha, abirayich shlosha. Just that much. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. Kol halayla isha, abirayich shlosha. Listen. Serenada kdosha sharim lach. This part. Serenada קדושה שרים לה. Let's put the 4 lines together. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. כל הלילה אישה, אבירייך שלושה, סרנדה קדושה שרים לך. Second part. אבל את מעולם, אבל את מעולם, לא הורדת סולם, לא הורדת סולם. Little tricky. לא זרקת בחטיפה, מפחת משיו כפפה. Tricky, right? That one's a little tricky. So half and half. לא זרקת בחטיפה. 1, 2. לא זרקת בחטיפה. מתפחת משיו כפפה. Ready? 1, 2. מתפחת משיו כפפה. Put those 2 lines together. לא זרקת בחטיפה, מתפחת משיו כפפה, שנרים לך. שנרים לך. So from here, לא זרקת, including שנרים לך. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. לא זרקת בחטיפה, מתפחת משיו כפפה, שנרים לך. From אבל את, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. אבל את מעולם לא הורדת סולם, לא זרקת בחטיפה, מטפחת משיו כפפה, שנרים לך. אבל את מעולם, same melody as starts the beginning, right? אבל את מעולם לא הורדת סולם, לא זרקת בחטיפה, מטפחת משיו כפפה, שנרים לך. From אבל את מעולם לא הורדת סולם, לא זרקת בחטיפה, מטפחת משיו כפפה, שנרים לך. Can we do the whole chorus once? And then we will go to the YouTube. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. כל הלילה אישה, אבירייך שלושה, סרנדה קדושה שרים לך. Whoops, sorry. Why did it do that? There we go. אבל את מעולם לא הורדת סולם, לא זרקת בחטיפה, מטפחת משיו כפפה, שנרים לך. And the final verse, the 4th time it goes, the beginning is the same. אבל איש מכולם לא זכה לעולם, להגיע מעלה בסולם. So nobody was able to get up on the ladder. ולהביא לך מניפה, מטפחת משיו כפפה, אשר זרקת בחטיפה, שנרים לך. So you may or may not get into that one, but that's okay if you don't. And there we go. So we're going to stop share and go into our YouTube. And part of my motivation in selecting these was that there was video so that you could see how wonderful these guys are. So here we go. And thank goodness, no commercials.
בחלון הכי גבוה כבר קבע האור, כנבילון אחרונה הוא רדה, ואנחנו כאן למטה רועדים מקור, נזמר באוזן סרנדה. כל הלילה אישה, אבירייך שלושה, סרנדה קדושה שרים לה. אבל את מעולם לא הורדת סולם, לא זרקת בחטיפה, מטפחת משיו כפפה, שנרים לה. ועלינו התפוח כבר נשר בסתיו, ונרטבנו במטר בחורף, לה לה לה. עוד מעט יגיע קיץ, ואיתו שרב, מתי תאכיל לנו אורז. כל הלילה אישה, אבירייך שלושה, סרנדה קדושה שרים לך, אבל את מעולם מעולם לא זרם בחטיפה, בחטף שיר חכם שנרים לה. בגיטרה שקנינו כבר פקם מיתר, הרוחות את כובענו העיפו לה לה לה, אך אנחנו עוד נשאיר לך בגרון נבחר. כל הלילה אישה אווירה קדושה, סרנה הקדושה שרים לה, אבל את מעולם לא הורדת סולם, לא זרק בחטיפה, בחטף שיר חכם שנרים לך. כל הלילה אישה אווירה קדושה, סרנה הקדושה שרים לה, אבל איש מכולם לא זכה מעולם להגיע מעלה בסולם ולהביא לך מניפה מפחת משיר כפפה שזרק בחטיפה שנרים לה.
So isn't that delightful? And I'm sure you could tell who was who. And the humorous, you know, Einstein being so much taller than the other two and having to duck down to those mics. By the way, Yoram Gaon, of course, was the tenor. Arik Einstein is the baritone, and Benny Amdulski, the shortest of them all, is the bass. So that's the way it goes. And we'll resume the slideshow. So his career with the Shlishiat Gesher HaYarkon was went on until 1966. And in between, he releases solo albums. And I'm going to, when I go back to the YouTube, I'm going to play you two different things. So still in these, and we'll hear a little bit of Ayelet Tachen, where he wins first place in the Israeli Song Festival. And really, these songs, as we've spoken about, there is a government push to create a new art form. And Arik Einstein, from very early, is very, very motivated by texts. Okay, remember, he had a poet write a poem for him at his birth. His father was an actor. And so he is very, very connected with texts, with poetry. And he releases in 1966 his first solo album. Most of the songs are written by Daphne Eilat and Tirza Atar. So notice, first of all, two women who are writing the lyrics for him. Daphne Eilat, you may remember, was a good friend of Chava Alberstein. We mentioned her in our session about Chava Alberstein, who died sadly very young. And so he releases these original songs, but also is part of
It's been going on for half an hour.
assorted duos and groups. You know, you know, they weren't connected solely to the trio. He was doing a lot of different music performing, and he releases a duo album in 1966 with one of the grand dames of Israeli music, with Yafa Yelkoni. And so I'm not going to tell you anything about Rak Etmol until you hear it. Whoop, back, go back, go back, and then we're gonna stop share. So we're gonna go back to YouTube right now. And so just a little bit of this piece, this song. I'm not gonna go into full screen because all you see is the record cover here. And the record cover is the best of the festivals. And so you can see over here, Arik Einstein, and over here, Benny Amdulski, and down here is the trio, Shlishiat Gesher HaYarkon. So this is Ayelet Tachen, which won first place. Let's see, here we go. I thought I had the songwriter here, but I don't. So still this very, very smooth sound, traditional sound, somewhat schmaltzy. As you know, we have no control over this. But we don't have to listen to it.
הלכת בין עצי התפוח, חייכת אלי שמש עולה, יבשה בשיחים הרוח, כללים לראשך עטרה, יבשה בשיחים הרוח, כללים לראשך עטרה.
So to be perfectly honest, this didn't do a whole lot for me. You know, I mean, it was pretty, but other than that, I didn't think it was a remarkable song. And I suspect that a big part of its winning was the fact that Einstein was just gorgeous, charismatic, and people loved him. But have a listen to this.
בנית ארמונות בחור, קולך שטף כגל גדול, מדי היה זה רק אתמול.
יום עבר, מן הסתיו עלה אחד נשר, רק קמת על הקר נשאר, רק יום אחד, רק יום עבר, ובליבי נותרה עיר זרה, בלי ים כחול, בלי ארמון בחול, ובלי צחוק, ובלי אתמול, רק אתמול.
So I know you're all kvelling. I assume I don't have to tell you what song that was. It was translated into Hebrew by Chaim Hefel, one of the top Israeli poets, and was part of a very popular type of Israeli song, which was a translation cover of popular foreign music. And I would say 98% positive that no permission was ever asked of any of the foreign artists, Beatles, Peter, Paul and Mary, you name it, Rolling Stones, nothing was ever asked. And so many of these, this was a very popular form of entertainment and Israeli songs. And wasn't that wonderful hearing him with Yafael Koni? How absolutely beautiful, and the vocal quality was so beautiful. And I had to share that with you because it just cracked me up. Hang on, I lost Zoom. Here you are. All right, so let's go back to my PowerPoint. And so the next step, the next group that he forms is called Chalonot Gvohim. And this was from 1967 to 1968. He joins what? So the name of the group, Chalonot Gvohim, is the high windows, and he joins with Shmuley Kraus and Josie Katz. Those of you who were at the Esther Ofarim session might recognize the name of Shmuley Kraus, who was also part of the Ofarim. Kraus has a nightclub in Tel Aviv, and so they start exploring more of a pop rock sound, which was to become his trademark. They are extraordinarily successful. They release one album, and when I made Aliyah to Israel in 1970, these songs were still top of the charts. They were beloved songs. They were settings. Strauss wrote music. Sometimes Einstein wrote words. The song that I'm going to play for you is words by the poet Rachel, known as Rachel. And so, the poetry was considered in the public domain. Nobody paid money to set Leah Goldberg, Rachel, Natan Altman, unless they wrote a song for you. And so they're very successful. They tour Europe. And in fact, the recording that we're going to see is from a European tour. Einstein is very frustrated. As I said, the words are very important for him. They translated many of the songs into French and German and English in order to perform for foreign audiences. And Einstein felt that this was not him. He needed the Hebrew words. The settings were written to be sung in Hebrew. And he just couldn't connect with an audience that didn't understand Hebrew. He was very homesick. He's a homebody. This became more and more a thing as he got older. He wanted to be in Israel. And all I could find was that there was a business disagreement with Krauss. We remember that Avi Ofarim also had a business disagreement with Krauss. I couldn't find any more dirt on that. But, you know, you have to wonder when it's the same person that people are having business disagreements with, what exactly was the source of that. However, Josie Katz, who is American and always sounds like Amerikayit when she sings a little bit, which as I said, when I was a young Ola in 1970, I said, well, I could sing with Arik Einstein and do better than her. And that was my fantasy world. But Josie Katz remains part of the inner circle with Arik Einstein, even though they don't really collaborate one-on-one, but she is part of the inner circle. So let's go to YouTube. And what we're going to hear is Hatishma Koli, which was a very, very popular, and we do have video for this one, and I think there's no commercial. And so
subscribe to Kingsford and Rectex YouTube channel for more.
We do have video. 4, 3, 2, 1.
תשמע קולי, רחוקי שלי, תשמע קולי, באשר הנך, קול קורא בעוז, קול בוכה בדמי, ומעל הזמן מצווה ברכה.
And as I said, my husband is here behind the screen, and I was listening to this music for hours and hours and hours, and I simply couldn't turn it off. Hippies of the 60s, he says. So I mean, it was like, okay, well, I need to play this song. No, and I need to play this song, and I need to play this song, and you need to remember also to put it in, again, one of my own stories. When I made Aliyah, I went into 7th grade. I think it was in 8th grade, so I'd been there for a year already. And Lahiton, Lahit is hit, and Lahiton was a little magazine about music, the music scene. And Lahiton had a centerfold, a poster in the middle. And so they put out a full life-size poster of Arik Einstein. Now remember, he was 6'4". So you had to buy the magazine, I think it was weekly. And so you bought the magazine, and every week had a piece of him. And I don't remember, I have a vague feeling that it was from the bottom up, you know, because I don't remember measuring the wall to see where you had to put it. And so I'd be carefully opening the staples in the middle to get out that centerfold and put it on my wall, because you don't want holes in the middle, and then build up the whole guy. I had to take it down. My sister got nightmares from this guy looking at her during the night. But, you know, this was my Israeli music. And so Hatishma Koli those of you who know what a kumsitz is, right? You go out by the fire. And so everybody sang, and the guys went, ha tishma, and the women, ha tishma, you know, it was like, it was part of who we were. So Arik Einstein, let me go back to my, PowerPoint. And so the Chanonot HaGvoim, the high windows, and so he leaves them, despite the fact that they have a European tour scheduled, they have an American tour scheduled. And this is also another piece of his really not caring about the money. And so the next, is this where I was going? I guess this is where I'm going. Okay, so at this point, we'll talk a little bit about Uri Zohar. So Uri Zohar was his commander in the Nachal. They became literally a brother from another mother. Okay, they were and Uri Zohar becomes Orthodox. He becomes a Baal Tshuva, and they remain close. You know, they remain close. They speak to each other. He eulogized Einstein upon his death, and Uri Zohar is a bundle of energy. He's a bundle of energy. He's a producer, he's an actor, he's a director, he's involved in everything. And he and Einstein form a production company called Hagar, which at this point he releases all of his records through this company. And they also are acting together. They put together a group called Lul, okay, with Einstein, Zohar. This is Shalom Chanoch. We'll talk about him in a little while. And this is Sima, who becomes Einstein's second wife. His first wife, I haven't found pictures of. And they release a movie called Mitzitzim, Peepers, which in an interview, Zohar says that it was re-released, and he talks about it, and it's really funny watching this really frum rabbi with the beard and the hat. And they're asking him, you know, were you embarrassed about the things that were in it? Because they were peeping Toms, you know, this was about watching the girls. And that the people who were involved in the production contacted him to ask him if it was okay with him that it was re-released. And it was re-released and became a cult classic. And that was when they first started making money from it. And in its initial release, they never made any money. So what I want to play for you, I'm going to play, it's a little bit long, it's a 7-minute skit, and it's called Olim Chadashim, or the Immigrants. There are 2 actors in this skit, Uri Zohar and Arik Einstein. They each play about 10 parts. And it is the story of immigrants coming to Israel, and each group of immigrants coming and the previous group going, oh my gosh, they're ruining the country. You don't really need to understand Hebrew. Some of what they're speaking, the Sudanese, for example, is made up nonsense. Most of the Yiddish is made up nonsense. There's a little bit of Hebrew, but you really don't need any language to understand this. It's universal, and it will help you see, sorry, got to change, do this first. Help you see the immense talent behind these men. Lul, there were 4 different programs of Lul that were released. They were released one a year. The powers that be, of course, were very critical of them. And for all of the young people, these became, you know, everybody like Monty Python, the people who memorized Monty Python, you know, this was I mean, there's a sketch about the biblical competition, and Uri Zohar says, "Ten baba gong, hit the gong," and Arik Einstein goes, that was my part. My boyfriend would say, "Ten baba gong," and I go, so this became part of general culture. So here you go, the new immigrants. Yeah.
Vodka! זישקה, ארץ ישראל זישקה, אוי פה בארץ חמדת אבות, תתגשמנה כל התקווה, היי, בוא נחיה ופה היי זישקה, היי, אידים שלושה, זישקה
أحمد شوف
مين هذا؟
هذا اليهود اللي عندين بابور اللي جابهم
Wladek, Jędek, chodź tutaj! Ach, jesteśmy w Eretz Israel! Unser Land, Eretz Israel! Ej! O, Litwo, ojczyzno moja, ty jesteś jak zdrowie! Ach, Wladek, Wladek! Eretz Israel!
Ну, Гриша, еще пшеще.
Gefilte Fisch im Sukkar.
Эх, черт твою холера!
ינal din babor ili džabom. Marioma! ארץ ישראל! ארץ הקודש! מריומה ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו שהחיינו וקיבלנו והגענו אוי ברוך אתה מקבץ ישראל בחסר מהצעוד ומתת אליו וצחול ומתת חווה ברוך אתה מקבץ ישראל שעול בנו בשר ברוך אתה ארץ הקודש אוי מריומה ארץ הקודש
No, Wladek, co ty mówisz? Ja nie mogę ma woda בצורה כזאתי.
לא, עכשיו כבר אי אפשר יהיה ללכת לשום מקום.
מלא ריח של זחוק
ושום
ופלאפל
וחילבה
וכל מיני חולרה. Ja nie mogę ma woda בצורה כזאתי.
Fritzi! Fritzi, wo bist du? Komm doch, Fritzi!
Papa, ich bin doch da, Papa!
Ach, Peppi! Das ist doch Eretz Israel, Shalom Palästina! Eretz Israel, unsere Papi! Wo ist der Professor Aberbuch?
Wo ist Professor Salzburg?
Und wer ist der Dr. Salzburg?
Dr. Aberbuch!
Also Dr. Aberbuch! Dankeschön! Shabanu Baaretz!
Papi?
Ja?
זה פלסטינה?
Ja?
אבל זה הכל חול, פאפה.
אנחנו נבריח השממה, du Dummkopf!
תראה את היקס. דנקשן, ביטשן, דנקשן. זה דוקטור, זה פרופסור, וזה, הנה עמדין בבור לג'בום. יקפות. דנקשן, ביטשן, פריצי ומריציה.
Hey, Jacqueline, Jojo, Albert, nous sommes à Israël.
מתחף סקרמפר. עכשיו, זה מדינה שלנו. זה דגל שלנו. מה שאתה רוצה שלנו. ז'וז'ו, ז'קלין, viens ici. Nous sommes à Israël.
No, Fritzi, was sagst du denn? Marokkaner.
עכשיו יהיה סקנדלים וסקנדלים כל יום.
Ja, keine Tarbut, keine Nimbus.
ינעל דין ובור אלי ג'אבום.
ג'וקשווילי, מירשווילי, זבטשווילי. אך, אנחנו בישראל. אך, אין קג"ב. אין כבד. אך, פה בארץ חמדת אבות, תתגשם.
תפסיקו עם השירה הזאת! אתם חושבים שאם תשירו תקבלו פה טלוויזיה בלי מכס?
רגארד גרמפר, רגארד לגרוזין, לכל אלה עולים חדשים מרוסיה. בטח, עכשיו יקבלו מספר לבן, סיכון לזוגות צעירים, מה שאתה רק רוצה.
And I'm going to pause it here because there's more talking. But this, as you could see, was classic. Most of what they said in the different languages was not those languages. It was making fun of the languages. So Uri Zohar is a huge influence in Einstein's life. When he became Baal Tshuva, it was a huge shock. His wife, it's called the Immigrant's Bonnie. I'll just, and his wife, Alona, his ex-wife, Alona, and their two daughters also became Balei Tshuva together with Zohar. And Einstein's two daughters are married to Zohar's two sons. So they have grandchildren in common. So let's go back to the PowerPoint. And so I mentioned the gentleman over here, Shalom Hanoch, who becomes Einstein's next collaborator. And so in a story that could only happen in Israel, well, as we say, Rak B'Yisrael, Shalom Hanoch also served in Lakat HaNachal. He was born in 1946, so 5 years younger than Einstein. And the Chalonot HaGvohim, Einstein, Krauss, and Josie Katz were performing at the bar. And after the performance, Shalom Hanoch goes up to them and he says, could I play my guitar for you? Could I play something for you? And Einstein says, sure, go ahead. And so Hanoch plays something for him. And very nice, very nice. And the Chalonot HaGvohim go on their tour. And Einstein comes back to Israel and is looking for somebody to work with. And so he calls up Shalom Hanoch and they begin working together. They release between 1968 and 1971, they release a full-length album every year. Every song on those 3 albums is considered a classic, a beloved classic. I knew all of those albums by heart in order. Many of these songs express deep personal feelings, and they show the closeness of the two men. And I'm going to show you a couple of clips. They didn't get to once in 1971. Shalom Hanoch moves to England, and I mean they separate on good terms. It's just that Einstein's not leaving Israel, and Hanoch needs to expand his boundaries. And after Shalom Hanoch comes back to Israel, they don't get together for a while. I have the date here written somewhere else. I think in 79. Yeah, in 79. So 8 years later, and in an interview, interviews with both of them, when the question is asked, well, why did it take you so long to get back together? They each said, well, you know, he was busy. I didn't want to impose myself. You know, he was doing other things. You know, who am I to impose on him? And so we're going to look at a couple of different clips. I think I'm going to reverse the order. This picture here is from a song called Katvu Alav Baiton. They wrote about him in the papers. Now, Arik Einstein was a very private person. I heard stories from girls who were groupies, who went, you know, backstage after the concert and were taken in the car with Einstein and Hanoch. And when they wouldn't put out, the car slowed almost to a stop and the girls were thrown out. So stories like these, I mean, in this I have it as a first person account. But there were many things that, you know, the more private you are, the less people can, the more people need to make stuff up about you. But what was clear was that Einstein, from working with Shalom Hanoch and onward, develops an extremely close, emotional, personal bond with his collaborators. And maybe this is part of the reason why they make such wonderful music together. Einstein has been tagged with being a mentor and finding wonderful talent. And his comment is he's just been lucky to be able to meet these wonderful people. And so Kadvu alav baiton, they wrote about him in the paper, and they wrote all kinds of things. And he had no idea that he was like that. So let me get back to here and get rid of this. And we're gonna go. All right, so sadly, there's another ad, but it's easier if I share it while we're together. And so what I really want you to notice in this, and I'm going to mute this and play it while I'm talking. What I really want you to notice about this is the unmistakable body language between the two men, and how they absolutely, unquestionably adore each other.
כתבו שהוא מצליח מאוד, הוא נהיה מפורסם, הוא נהיה מפורסם. כתבו שהוא מרוויח, כתבו שהוא חדש, בסוף כתבו שהוא מושלם. כתבו עליו בעיתון הרבה דברים, והוא בכלל לא ידע שהוא כזה.
That last shot, that was Uri Zohar. So really the very, very intimate affection, and you can imagine standing that close to somebody and looking them straight in the eye for that amount of time. You have to be really, really close. And now I'm going to play you a little part of a rehearsal. The song is Lama li lakachat lalev, or Why Should I Take It to Heart? This is another Shalom Chanoch song. And I want you to notice, first of all, the group that's standing around. They are rehearsing literally in each other's faces. And I'm going to play it till a point where you can see Uri Zohar pointing into Arik Einstein's face, cueing him. And you can see how close he is. All right, you can see in this shot here, hopefully you can see, this is the microphones here. This is Shalom Chanoch. This is Arik Einstein. Uri Zohar is right here. Okay, and so given the intimate involvement of Uri Zohar, going back to Shlishiat Gesher HaYarkon, if he didn't like Yehoram Gaon, there was no way that he was going to continue being involved in something that Einstein was involved in. There might be peaks here of
זה מה שרציתי לכתוב, לך עם זה לאט ואז תוכל פשוט לרוץ מההתחלה.
This over here on the side, that's Uri Zohar. And this lady here, that's Sima, who at this time is dating Zohar and will later end up marrying Einstein.
יש לי הרבה לאהוב מרוב.
So it's a very intimate working environment. Hard for me to imagine. And again, you saw his eyes. Was he stoned? Looked stoned to me. Looked stoned to me at that point. So let's go back here and but the music that they made together was incredible, absolutely incredible and amazing. And there are several threads that run through. So the two songs that we heard were very personal. One they write about it in the paper, Lama li lakahat lalev, which is why should I take it to heart? There's so many beautiful things in the world. But another thread that ran through Einstein's work all along was also songs aimed at children. And they were sometimes included in the mainstream album. And so this is our next sing-along, which is called Wind, Wind, Wind. The text is Miriam Yelan Stekelis, who was a very well-known poet for children, and the melody by Shalom Hanoch. And somewhat unusually, it starts with the chorus, and that's what we're going to learn. So wind, 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 wind. Why not lie down to rest? From the morning you will run wild, and here comes the night. And the verses, angels are already putting out lanterns in the sky. They light candles so slowly, you hardly see them. And you wander the hills, whistling and howling, bending the roses and bugging the children. The whole garden wants to sleep. The cypress, the castor, have pity on the flowers. They are all groaning. Wind, 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 why not lie down to rest? From the morning you run wild, and here comes the night. So since this was written for children, a little bit easier to get the text. Ruach, 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 lama lo tishkav lanuach, min haboker tishtolel, vehine kvar bahalel. Nice and easy, okay? Let's go over the words. Ruach is wind, 4 times. Ruach, 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 ruach. Lama lo tishkav lanuach. Ready? Here we go. Ruach, 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 ruach. Lama lo tishkav lanuach. Min haboker tishtolel. Tishtolel is a Hebrew word that doesn't quite have an English translation. Going crazy, going wild is about as close. So min haboker tishtolel, vehine kvar bahalel. Ready? Min haboker tishtolel, vehine kvar bahalel. All 4 lines. Ruach, 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 lama lo tishkav lanuach. Min haboker tishtolel, vehine kvar bahalel. One more time. Ruach, 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 lama lo tishkav lanuach. Min haboker tishtolel, vehine kvar bahalel. Here we go. Just take a sip of water. Ruach, 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 lama lo tishkav lanuach. Can we do just that much? Ruach, 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 lama lo tishkav lanuach. Min haboker tishtolel, vehine kvar bahalel. Min haboker tishtolel, vehine kvar bahalel. So nice and simple. Let's, my goodness, stop share and go into my YouTubes. Get out of his face. And this, the album cover that you see here, this was the first album that he released with Shalom Hanoch. Sadly, no video, but I think we got the picture of how they recorded these. Hear the wind?
רוח, 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 למה לא תשכח לנוע? מן הבוקר תשתולל, והנה כבר בהלב, מלאכים כבר מכניסים לשמיים פנסים, מדליקים נרות בלט, אין רואים אותה כמעט. רוח, 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 למה לא תשכח לנוע? מן הבוקר תשתולל, והנה כבר בהלב. רוח, 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 למה לא תשכח לנוע? מן הבוקר תשתולל, והנה כבר בהלב. ואתה הולך בתל, ושורק ומיילל, מכופף את הורדים, ומציק לילדים. רוח, 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 למה לא תשכח לנוע? מן הבוקר תשתולל, והנה כבר בהלב. רוח, 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 למה לא תשכח לנוע? מן הבוקר תשתולל, והנה כבר בהלב. כל הגן רוצה לישון, גם הברוש הקיקיון, צר מאוד על הפרחים, הם כולם נאנחים. רוח, 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 למה לא תשכח לנוע? מן הבוקר תשתולל, והנה כבר בהלב. רוח, 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 למה לא תשכח לנוע? מן הבוקר תשתולל, והנה כבר בהלב. רוח, 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 רוח.
And we're going to get out of there because I still have a lot to do and we're already an hour in. Okay, so as I said, Shalom Chanoch leaves Israel, and Arik Einstein has been working with a group called the Churchills, and the bass player for the Churchills is Mickey Gabrielov, and the lead guitarist is Yitzhak Klepter. And apparently Einstein knew that Gabrielov puttered in music, in songwriting. And so after Hanoch leaves, he says to, Einstein approaches Gabrielov and says to him, and you can see he's now 10 years younger than Einstein. I heard you playing some stuff. Why don't you play me something? Let's get together, come play me something. And Gabrielov says he did. He went and he played something, and Einstein said, I like that. What else you got? And so they began. And again, they release songs. They release 3 albums, 1 a year. Each one becomes a hit. Some of the best known songs, Ani Ve'ata, which we will sing shortly, and also many humorous songs. And I won't play you any of Ani Ohev Lishon because, as I said, we're running. I'm going to run long as it is. But Ani Ohev Lishon is, I love to sleep. I want to sleep. I need to sleep, and that's how I pass the day. And there's a section in the middle where it's instrumentation, and what you hear is lots of yawning. So very amusing. So we will move on to our next sing-along, Ani Ve'ata, probably one of the best known songs that he has written. You and I will change the world. You and I, and by then, everyone else will follow us. Other people said it before me, but it doesn't matter. You and I will change the world. You and I We'll try from the beginning. It will be tough for us, but no matter, it's not too bad. Others said it before me, but it doesn't matter. You and I will change the world. I think most of you are probably somewhat familiar with this. There is no chorus, but the verses repeat frequently. אני ואתה נשנה את העולם. אני ואתה, אז יבואו כבר כולם. אמרו את זה קודם לפניי, לא משנה. אני ואתה נשנה את העולם. Let's give it a try. Jump right in. 3 and 4 and אני ואתה נשנה את העולם. אני ואתה, אז יבואו כבר כולם. אמרו את זה קודם לפניי, לא משנה. אני ואתה נשנה את העולם. Second set of words, אני ואתה ננסה מההתחלה. I think I have an extra ha in there. יהיה לנו רע, אין דבר, זה לא נורא. And then the words are the same. אני ואתה ננסה מההתחלה. יהיה לנו רע, אין דבר, זה לא נורא. אמרו את זה קודם לפניי, זה לא משנה. אני ואתה נשנה את העולם. So I'm going to go to the YouTube, and this is a YouTube that was put together in memoriam. So it has a bunch of pictures, as well as part of the original performance by Einstein.
אני ואתה נשנה את העולם. אני ואתה, אז יבואו כבר כולם. אמרו את זה קודם לפניי, לא משנה. אני ואתה נשנה את העולם. אני ואתה ננסה מההתחלה. יהיה לנו רע, אין דבר, זה לא נורא. אמרו את זה קודם לפניי, זה לא משנה. אני ואתה נשנה את העולם.
For your deposit here. There's just, I told you, this was curating this and leaving things out was really, 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 really hard. But we can do an Arik Einstein sing-along at some point. And so the next on his collaboration parade is Yoni Rechter. born in 1955. They get younger and younger as he gets older. Yoni Rechter was basically unknown. Those of you are familiar with Sipure Pugi, that was his breakout. And so in this period where he starts working with Rechter in the 70s, many of his songs are on the hit parade, and he's voted Singer of the Year in 1971. And at this point, he starts releasing a series of albums of older Israeli songs combined with his own older songs. Yashan V'gam Chadash, which is old and also new, many arranged by Rechter. And together with Yoni Rechter, who is an amazing musical voice, and you might remember that he becomes the exclusive music director and organizer, arranger for Esther Ofarim. He writes some of the most beautiful songs ever. And he realizes that the poems of Avraham Chalfi, remember him, the one who wrote a poem when he was born, are simply not known. And so he writes some of the most beautiful songs, including Atur Mitzchech, which is almost sounds like it comes out of Shir HaShirim, out of Song of Songs. Your brow is crowned with black gold. I think I read about this in song. Your braid shines with light and gold. And so I have to play you part of this. And you will notice a young woman, a then unknown singer who went on to make a huge career, Judith Ravitz, who was another one of the talents that Einstein picked up out of obscurity. And this is the original 1977. This is Ravitz right here. And we'll only play part of this song, but I recommend that you listen to the whole thing because, in my humble opinion, it's one of the most beautiful songs ever written.
עטור מצחך זהב שחור, מילים אברהם חלפי, מנגינה יוני רכטר. אני רוצה להזמין את קורין אלעל, יהודית רביץ ואבנר קנר, שנשיר ביחד.
עטור מצחך זהב שחור, אינני זוכר אם כתבו כך בשיר, מצחך מתחרז עם עיניים ואור, אינני זוכר אם חרזו כך בשיר, אך למי שתהי חייב להשאיר. חלוקי חברות צמרירי ורח, עד בו מתעטה.
So you're going to have to make do with that. Sorry. So much, so much, so much, so much. And then I had to include Arik the poet. So in addition to writing, and I believe this is with Yoni Rechter, so he writes a poem for his second wife, Sima. He has 2 children with her, a daughter and his only son. And he writes, כשהיינו צעירים, את זוכרת, אז פרחה האהבה. When we were young, you remember, then love blossomed. And today, after years, there is no other. It's the same love. You changed, my love, you say, and you too, my beloved. I would do it all again, all again. How good it is that you are with me. When you're with me, happy and laughing, then I laugh with you. And when you suddenly cry and hurt, so I go along with you. Hug me now, you say, and you to my love, I would do it all again, all again. How good that you are with me. תחבק אותי עכשיו, את אומרת, אז גם את אהובתי, על הכל הייתי שוב חוזרת. כמה טוב שאת איתי. So we're going back and forth again. And again, just a taste of this.
כשהיינו צעירים, את זוכרת? אז פרחה האהבה, והיום אחרי שנים אין אחרת, זאת האהבה. השתנית אהובי, את אומרת, וגם את אהובתי, על הכל הייתי שוב.
And there we go. So I just had to include a little bit of his own poetic voice. And it's hard without understanding the Hebrew to understand how beautifully he sings this song. His next collaborator, Yitzhak Klepter, we're getting younger and younger and younger. This has got to be late 1970s and early 80s. He continues recording with Miki Gavrielov. He reunites with Shalom Chanoch. 1981 is his final live tour. He tours with Rechter and Gabrielov and Daphna Almoni, who is an Israeli rock singer. And he's just sick of performing. Not clear, I have a quote from him afterwards. He does have a catastrophic car accident in 1982, which leads to a reclusive life. His wife is very badly injured. He is injured, but he continues writing. I think we'll skip the Yoshev al Gader, which is again a completely different sound. And from what people described, there was a funny regarding Yoni Rechter. Yoni Rechter told that Einstein would sit in the bathroom reading poetry, and he would yell through the door and say, "Hey, listen to this." And he'd read a poem to Rechter through the door, and if Rechter liked it, then they would write together. I can't remember which of the collaborators, it might be Klepter, who said, I don't know what to do. How are we going to do this? And Einstein said, don't worry, come to my house. We'll drink some coffee. It'll work out. Another thing which I neglected to point out, and you can see it very clearly on this album here at the top left. Okay, remember Einstein was born in 1939. So Klepter is already almost a generation younger. Notice the size of the print of the names. Same size, side by side, no matter who the collaborator was. Same size. And that was his insistence. Go look for Bernie Taupin's name on Elton John's records. They are very hard to find. In the back, teeny tiny print. So from the 80s until his death in 2013, he continues to release 1 to 2 to 3 albums every year. Every year. Incomprehensible. He doesn't perform, and I don't know what happened to him psychologically, because certainly the person that we see at the beginning isn't shy. And he was always described as being an introvert, but he says in an interview with Haaretz, I performed from the age of 18 until I was 42. I wasn't exactly a stage animal. I was held back by the embarrassment, the bashfulness, and it became more evident as the years went by. By the way, when I say bashfulness, I'm not proud of it. I wish I could grab a microphone and sing like Sinatra, but I don't have what it takes, and a person should adapt to his capabilities. On the other hand, in the studio, I blossom. That's my natural habitat, where I'm not bashful. The problem is that this profession has its minefield. Success is accompanied by fame and a form of adoration, and I really don't get along with that. That's where I draw the line. It's pleasant to be loved, but not more. And so, and he's asked in an interview, he gives occasional live interviews. They always have very, very careful conditions about who can be present and who cannot be present. And but what if you got offered a lot of money? I mean, you could ask I heard you were offered $1 million for a performance, And Einstein's response was, that's even bigger incentive for me not to do it because it's the wrong reason. In 2010, 20 years after he stopped performing, he was the most played artist on radio stations in Israel, according to the American Israeli Musical Artists Organization. And in 2012, he was voted the best Israeli singer of all time. The obituary from Tablet, nothing can describe what Einstein meant to us, Israelis born any time between the War of Independence and the first war in Lebanon, which was 1984. Einstein knew it too, which is why decades ago, at the height of his popularity, he locked the door to his small apartment and refused to come out. The nation whose music he had defined more than any other man no longer existed. He referred to it as good old land of Israel, a phrase he coined himself and that quickly became shorthand for a mythical time out of time, an idyll packed thick with blue-eyed and tanned young men and women for whom love and song and God and country were the same thing. Almost single-handedly, Einstein preserved Israeli culture. Now, even beyond that, in reading some of the comments, and I never read comments on YouTube's, but I happened to be caught, my eye was caught, and a female posted a few months after he died, does anybody feel like I do? I feel gutted. I feel like there's a hole in my soul that can't be filled by anything else. And I miss him so much. And then somebody else replies, and then a couple of lines down, she writes again a year later, and she says, oh my God, I can't believe I wrote that I was so open. I was so young in 9th grade. Okay. And 2 lines later, a little girl writes, well, sorry, I gave it away, but a girl writes and she says, well, I felt the same way, and I was only in 3rd grade when he died. So, you know, it's hard to define this kind of, that's why I ultimately started the way that I did. Arik Einstein provides the soundtrack of Israeli life. There are many, many interviews with different people, you know, man in the street, and it's like, well, what song speaks to you? And many of them say, Saleat, drive slower. You know, Ani Ve'ata, somebody posted some music from the Black Flag demonstrations that are going on against corruption and against Netanyahu. And before it goes to a more contemporary song, there's a little instrumental clip of Ani Ve'ata. Einstein continues to describe the lives of Israelis, and the language in his songs is pure artistry. So I had to restrain myself with that. And even with skipping stuff, I still filled up 90 minutes. So if you wanted to add anything, now's the time. If you have any questions, I don't promise that I can answer them. If you'd like me to send you my PowerPoint, it has the links to all of the songs and the skit that we saw tonight. So these programs, you know, we don't charge for them. So if you feel like supporting the Colorado Hebrew Chorale by popping over to our website and making a donation, that would be wonderful. Next month, there will not be a Marvelous Musical Men program because I will be doing the L'chaim program on Monday, December 14th, a program of Israeli Hanukkah songs. I can guarantee you that we will not be singing Dreidel Dreidel in English, Hebrew, or Yiddish. That will not be any of the songs. And I have found some YouTubes with some just wonderful, wonderful pictures. So I will be that'll be that week for the L'chaim programs. You know, you get your emails and so on. In January, I don't remember which order, I think I'm doing Shlomo Artzi, and then in February, Yoram Gaon, and after that, we'll see where our life takes us, but remarkable.
And when do we start rehearsals?
Monday.
This coming Monday. Okay.
This coming Monday, Kol Nashim begins rehearsals. So thank you, everybody. I promise I will read all the comments afterwards. Thank you to old friends and new friends, and I hope to see you again.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Laila Tov.
Looking at your boyfriend.
My boyfriend.
The one who was singing.
Laila Tov, everybody. Good night.
Bye.
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 Bye, Lala Tov.